Hash for 11 years the shepherd's daughter never knew who paid. The Silent Duke never told her. My brother was called the Silent Duke, and for 11 years I believed the name was only a polite way of calling him cold. I was 3 and 20 the spring I found the ledger, and I have never in my life been so pleased with myself as I was in the hour before I opened it. It was March. I had been sent home in disgrace from a great deal of expensive idleness, and my brother had not scolded me. He had handed me the estate books and told me to make myself useful, which I have since understood was the only rebuke he knew. So I sat in the muniment room with a cold hearth and 40 years of accounts, and I found it on the 3rd afternoon. A sum drawn quarterly, not a small sum. Not a large one either, nothing that would trouble Renfell, but perfectly steady, 4 times a year for 11 years, paid out to a solicitor called Peel of Netherby with no note of what it purchased. No timber, no tenants' repairs, no tithe, nothing. I remember sitting back in that chair with my heart going like a hare's, because I knew what a young man of my age was expected to know. A duke of 32 who had never married, never courted, never once looked at the daughters paraded past him, and a quarterly sum sent quietly through a country solicitor to a place I had never heard of. I thought, there is a woman, I thought, there is a child, and God forgive me, I was delighted. My brother had been a monument since he was 1 and 20, and I had wanted all my life to find one crack in him. I did not ask him. If I had asked him, he would have told me the truth, and I would have believed him, and this would be a much shorter story. Instead, I took a horse from the stable at first light and rode 14 miles up onto Sennettfell to catch my brother in his sin. The road gave out 3 miles below the village and became a stony scar going up through wet bracken, and I understood that whatever my brother kept up here, he did not keep it for his comfort. Kirkborough sat in the fold of 2 hills with its back to the weather, 14 houses, a church the size of a barn, and I had expected squalor. That was the first thing that put me out of countenance. It was poor, but poor the way a well-kept boot is old. The church roof was new-slated. There was a schoolhouse door with a bell beside it. The walls were mended. A place that ought by every rule to have been sliding into the ground was instead holding. I stopped a boy with a barrow and asked where I might find the business of a solicitor named Peel, which was a foolish question. He looked at me as though I had asked the way to Persia. "You'll want T-fold," he said. "Nell's up Y-T-yows, everyone wants Nell." So I went up. She was in a hollow of the wall with her sleeves turned back to the elbow and her arms wet to the shoulder, and she was pushing a lamb back into the world that had got itself stuck coming out. She did not look up. She said without any particular ceremony, "If you're the surveyor, you can wait, and if you're the drover, you're a day early, and if you're neither, you can hold this." I held it. I, who had once refused to carry my own umbrella, knelt in the wet on Sennettfell and held a ewe's head while a shepherd's daughter delivered a lamb into my very good coat. When it was done, she sat back on her heels and blew her hair out of her face and looked at me properly, and I saw that she was perhaps 5 and 20 and brown from the weather, and not beautiful in any way the county would have recognized, and that she had the steadiest gray eyes I have ever been looked at by. "You're not the drover," she said. "No." "Well," she wiped her arms on sacking. "You've a good hand with a yow, whoever you are. Come down and get some tea before you die of being polite." I said, because I was still hunting my scandal and had not the wit to be ashamed, "I am looking into a matter of money, a trust, sums that come up here through a solicitor in Netherby, for the roof, I think, and the school. Do you know who pays them?" And Nell Thirlby laughed at me, not unkindly, the way you laugh at a man who has come a long way to ask what the weather is. "Everybody knows that," she said. "It's the Fold's benefactor. He's been dead since before I can remember." Grandam Thirlby sat by the fire in the low room with her hands quiet in her lap, and she turned her whole face towards the door when I came in, the way people do who are listening instead of looking. "There's a gentleman with thee," she said. "There is," said Nell. "He held a lamb." "Then he's better than most gentlemen." The old woman put out her hand into the air until I came and took it. Her fingers went over my knuckles once, quite frankly, the way a horse dealer reads a hawk. "Soft," she said. "Never mind, sit thee down." They gave me tea in a cup with a mended handle, and oat bread, and I understood as I ate it that I was eating a good deal of somebody's week. No apology was made for the room, and none was needed. It was scrubbed to the bone. I asked about the benefactor. There's a trust, Nell said, cutting bread. It came the spring my father died. Mr. Peel writes to the vicar 4 times a year, and the vicar reads out what's to be done with it. It mended the church. It bought the school and pays the master. 2 winters back it took 12 yows for the fold when the murrain had us, and it paid the shepherd's widow at Netherhead when her man went off the crag. And nobody knows who left it. Mr. Peel says the gentleman wished it not spoken of, she shrugged. Folks say he was a wool merchant out of Kendal, saved on the fell once. Folks say a great many things. My grandam says. My grandam says nowt, said the old woman placidly. I let that go past me. I was doing arithmetic. Because a roof and a schoolmaster's wage and 12 ewes and a widow at Netherhead do not come to the sum I had found in my brother's books. Not by half. There is more of it, I said. Isn't there? The trust does something else. Nell's hands went still on the loaf. It paid for my grandam's eyes, she said. Grandam Thirlby had gone blind slowly over 4 years, the way milk goes into water, until she could not tell her own granddaughter from the doorpost. And there was a surgeon in York, a Mr. Corvin, who could take the cataract off an eye with a needle, and who charged for it what a shepherd's family on Senate Fell might earn in 3 years of not eating. The letter had come in November. It did not ask. It informed them that the fee was met, and the coach fare and a room in York for the fortnight, and it was signed by Peel. I read it 4 times, Nell said. I thought it was a mistake. I sat up the whole night with it thinking, when they find their mistake we shall have to give it back, and how shall we give back a thing we haven't got? And it was not a mistake. No. She looked into the fire. She sees light now, Nell said. Shapes, a face if it's near this near. She held her hand up at arm's length from her own cheek. She can find her way to the wall and back and knows the door from the window. She saw the snow last winter. She stood in it. I stood in it a long while, the old woman said. Our Nell fetched me in like a cat. And Nell laughed, and her eyes were streaming, and she wiped them on her wrist as though they had merely got wet like the rest of her that morning, and went on cutting bread. I sat in that mended room with my cup in my hand, and thought about the pleasure I had taken in the word scandal asterisk, and something turned over in me that has never entirely turned back. Then Grandam Thirlby said, Come here to me, lad. I went. She put her hand up and found my jaw and turned my face towards the window, into what light there was, and she looked at me from a distance of 9 inches with her ruined eyes, a long time. Say summat else, she said. I don't know what you want me to say. That'll do. She let me go. She sat back. And she said quite calmly to the room, Thou hast his voice. I got the rest of it from the shepherd who kept the inn, because in Kirkborough the inn and the shepherd were the same man, and both were mostly a bench by a fire. 11 years back, the winter of the great squall, he called it, and the whole village dated things from it. A rider had come over the top of Senate Fell in the last hour of daylight on the wrong side of a black sky. Anybody who knew the fell would have gone round. He had gone over, and the snow came down on him out on the flat, where there is not a wall nor a thorn for a mile and a half. Jonas Thirlby went out for his sheep, and found a horse standing over a man. Jonas got him down, the shepherd said, which no other man in this dale could have done, for it were a big man and dark by then, and he were 3 days by that fire. 3 days, and in a hard February on a holding on the high fell, 3 days of fire meant the peat that had been cut and stacked to last until April, and the meat hung to last as long, and the blankets off the beds. They burned tea-lot, the shepherd said comfortably. Aye, well, thou dossn't let a man die on thy floor. The rider had been out of his head the 1st day and silent the 2nd, and on the 3rd he stood in the door with his hat in his hand and made an offer. He put a ring in Jonas Thirlby's hand, the shepherd said, and Jonas gave it him back. I did not move. Jonas said, I heard him say it, I were stood at Teagate. Jonas said, we don't sell a fire. The old man laughed to himself. Proud as a bishop, Jonas, hadn't a shilling in tea world. And the riders left it on tea windowsill and rode off, never gave his name, never come back. I said, and my voice was not steady, what became of Jonas Thirlby? The shepherd's face did a slow thing. He were out 3 nights in that snow after his yows, he said, for they'd scattered while he were fetching yon fellow in, took a cold on his chest and never shifted it. He were dead by May. I sat there in the smoke. The ring, I said, did you see it? Nell has it yet. Never pawned it neither, and there were winters she could have. Plain gold. Red stone. He squinted at the fire, and I already knew what he was going to say and did not want him to say it. There were a little bird cut in it, he said, like a wren. I rode back through the dark, and I did not spare the horse, and I went into my brother's library at 11 at night with my boots wet to the knee and the mud of Senate fell on my coat. And I said, "You told our father you had lost his ring." He was at the desk with one candle. He set down his pen. For a long moment my brother looked at me, and I watched the whole of it arrive in his face, 11 years of it, and I understood at last what people had been calling coldness. It was not coldness. It was a man holding a door shut with his shoulder. "Where have you been?" he said. "Kirkborough." He closed his eyes. "I thought you kept a woman," I said. "I thought I should find a bastard child and a cottage and have something to hang over you for the rest of my life. Instead, I have held a lamb and eaten a family's dinner and been told by a blind woman that I have my brother's voice." He did not speak. 11 years, I said. You have paid that village for 11 years and never once told them your name. Why? And my brother, who was called Silent, told me. I had never heard him say so much before, and I do not think I heard him say so much again. "Because I was 21, he said. And I had ridden over that fell in a temper because our father had told me I was not fit to hold Renfell, and I wished to prove I could go over the top in February. That is all, that is the whole of it. Vanity. And a man I had never seen came out into that weather and pulled me off the ground and burned his winter to keep me alive and would not take payment and died of it in the spring. You could not have known." "I know what I owe," he said it very quietly. "Do you imagine there is a sum? Name it. Tell me the figure that buys back Jonas Thirlby's April, and I will write the draft tonight and be a free man by morning." I had no answer. "There is no figure," he said. "So I did not pay him. I have only kept it going, quarterly, like breathing. It is not generosity. Do not look at me as though it were generosity. It is the interest on a debt that has no principal." "Then tell them," I said. "Tell asterisk her asterisk. She thinks a dead wool merchant bought her grandmother's site. She would. She would thank me." He stood up. "Yes, that is exactly what she would do, and then it would be finished, and I should have bought a receipt with her gratitude and gone home lighter, and she would be, for the rest of her life, a woman who had been given something by the Duke of Renfell. Do you know what that is? It is a debt the other way about. I have taken enough from that house without taking their standing in their own village as well." He turned to the window, where there was nothing to see but our own reflected candle. "And there is a worse reason," he said. "Tell me." "I have been to Kirkborough twice." His voice went very level. "Not to be seen. I stood at the back of that church both times and left before the blessing, and I could not have told you afterwards one word of the sermon." I understood him. I was 23. I was not a fool. "Then in God's name." "Then consider what I should be," my brother said, "if I walked up that dale and said, 'I am the man who has been paying for your bread these 11 years, and I have come to ask for your hand.' Consider what she could possibly say to me, what she could say and still be free to say it." He shook his head once. "No, a man who buys the ground a woman stands on does not then ask her to stand closer. I will not do it. I would rather she never knew my name at all." Behind me in the doorway, our aunt said, "How very affecting." Lady Carsington had come to Renfell in January to arrange my brother's marriage, as she had been trying to arrange it for 6 years, and she could hear a secret through 2 doors and a hearth wall. She came into the candlelight in her wrapper with her hair in papers, entirely calm. "A shepherd's girl," she said. "Aunt, be quiet, you have done enough for one evening." She never raised her voice. That was the worst of her. "Renfell, there are 11 years of drafts in your own hand going up a fell to a household of 2 women. You will tell me how that reads to a county attorney or to the Halbrooks, whose daughter you are to be engaged to on Thursday. It reads as a kept woman. It reads as a child put away in the hills. It does not matter what it is. It matters what it reads as, and when it is read aloud in Netherby Market, that girl will not be able to walk into her own church." And I watched my brother go quite white, because she had found the one thing he could be made to move by, and she had found it in under a minute. "The trust ends," Lady Carsington said. "This week, Peel writes and closes it. And on Thursday you will stand up in your own hall and be engaged to Miss Halbrook, and in 5 years no one will remember there was ever a question." "The school," I said. The schoolmaster's wage. Aunt, there is a widow at Netherhead. I am sure they will contrive, she said, as people do, and she went to bed. My brother stood at the window a long time after she had gone. Write to Peel, he said at last. Don't. Write to Peel. And then, because he was a better man than his voice was, and write privately to the vicar. The school is to go on. Put it under my aunt's own charity list where she will not think to look, and if she finds it, tell her I did it to spite her. He picked up the candle. They will think their benefactor's money has run out, he said to nobody. That is a small unhappiness. It is not the worst thing I have done up there. But he had reckoned without a blind old woman who had spent 11 years listening. I have this part from Nell, long afterwards, in that same low room with the rain on the window. Peel's letter came on the Tuesday. The vicar read it out, and there was a good deal of quiet talk in Kirkborough that week about how all things come to an end, and the schoolmaster began looking at notices for a post in Kendal, and Nell went up the fell and did the work, because the work does not care what letters have come. On the Thursday morning, Grandam Thirlby said, Our Nell, sit thee down. I'm going up. Sit thee down. So she sat. That lad that come, her grandmother said. Yon soft-handed one, he had voice. Whose voice? Man that lay by this fire 11 years sin. I were not blind then. I saw him plain 3 days, and I've heard nought but voices these 4 years, and I'll tell thee summat, Arnell, a voice is a better face. Yon lad were his brother or his son. And thy trust stopped a fortnight after he come. The old woman's hands were quite steady in her lap. 11 year that money came, snow nor sun, and never a name to it, and never a word asked for it, not so much as a asterisk thank you kindly wanted. Does thou think a man like that stops for nought? A man like that doesn't stop. Summat stopped him. And Nell sat in her wet coat and understood all at once that her grandmother's eyes had been bought by a living man who did not want to be thanked, and that something had gone wrong with him. There were a name in yon letter, her grandmother said, lawyer's name. Netherby's nobbut 9 mile. Nell went to the press and took out the tin that had been her mother's, and out of it the ring, plain gold, a red stone, a wren cut into it. The ring her father had put back into a stranger's hand 11 Februaries before. She had kept it through 4 winters when it would have fed them. There's a coach at Netherby at 3, said her grandmother. Wear thy mother's cloak, it's better one. At Renfell there were 60 to dinner and 100 coming after, and I had never in my life so hated a room. Every candle in the house was lit, the plate was out, and the county stood about being magnificent at one another. Miss Halbrook was in the middle of it in silver, and she was, I want to be just, a perfectly good young woman who deserved better than what she had been brought there for. My brother shook hands by the fire and said the correct things in the correct order, and I watched him do it and thought, he will get through this, and it will kill something in him, and nobody in this room will ever know. Lady Carsington had the announcement timed for 9:30. At 20 past, a footman came along the wall to me with his face carefully empty, and said there was a young person at the side door who would not go away, and had given no name, and had said only that she had come to return something. I did not run. I have often wished I had run. She stood on the flags by the boot-room in a good old cloak black to the knee with fell water, her hair down out of its pins on one side from the coach, holding her hands together in front of her the way people do when they have decided not to be frightened. Nell, I said. You never said your name, she said, and I've come a long way to say I don't hold it against you. You must let me. No, don't, she said it gently. Don't be kind at me yet, my lord, or I shall lose the whole of it. I've been 3 hours on that coach getting it straight. She lifted her chin. Is your brother the Duke here? Behind me, through 2 doors, my aunt's voice had begun the little bell tap on the glass that means a room is to be quiet. And I made the only good decision of my life to that date. I opened the door into the hall, and I stood out of the way. She came up the length of that hall in her wet cloak with the fell mud on her boots, and one by one every glittering person in it stopped talking, and by the time she was halfway there was no sound in Renfell but her footsteps and the fire. My aunt got in front of her, of course she did. You will come with me, Lady Carsington said, very low. I'd rather not, thank you, said Nell Thirlby. Whatever you have been promised. I've been promised nothing. Nell looked at her quite steadily, and I saw my aunt, who had faced down duchesses, take half a step back from a shepherd's daughter. Nobody up our dale has ever been promised oat. That's rather the point, if you'll let me get to it. Then she looked past her down the hall and found my brother by the fire. He had not moved. He stood with one hand on the mantel, looking at her as a man looks at weather coming that he has no intention of going indoors from. "Your Grace," said Nell, 11 years ago you lay 3 days by my father's fire on Senate Fell. Somebody in that room said "oh" out loud. You offered him a ring and he gave it you back, and you left it on the sill and rode away and never said your name. She put her hand into her cloak. So he never could thank you, and you've been paying for it ever since, where nobody could see you do it. The roof, the school, the yows, Bella Hartop at Netherhead when her man went off the crag. And my grandam's eyes. She said the last 2 words and her voice went, and she stopped, and she got it back. My grandam saw the snow last winter, she said. She stood out in it till I fetched her in. That was you. Nothing, the fire, and 100 people not breathing. Now I can't pay for that, Nell said. I want to be plain because I know what everyone in this fine room is thinking about a girl in wet boots. I haven't come for anything. There's nothing in the world I could give you for my grandam's eyes, and I'll not insult us both by pretending. I've come to give back the one thing that's yours. And she walked the last of it, and stood in front of the Duke of Renfell, and held out her hand and opened it. The candles caught the little red stone. You left it on our windowsill, she said, and my father said we don't sell a fire, and he was right, and I've kept it 11 years. It was never ours. Here it is. She swallowed. And thank you, there. Somebody said it to you at last. It should have been my father, and it's me instead. Now I'll get out of your house and let you have your evening. She put the ring into his hand. She turned to go. And my brother said, Miss Thirlby. The silent Duke of Renfell crossed his own hall in front of the whole of the county, stopped her with her own name, and then did a thing I have never seen another man do. He put himself where everybody could look at him, and he told the truth. You have thanked me, he said, for a debt I owe you. I will not have that stand in this room. So you will all hear it, and you may make of it what you like. Somebody moved. He did not turn his head. I was 21 and vain, and I rode over the top of Senate Fell in February to prove I could, and I lay down in that snow to die of it. Jonas Thirlby had never seen me before. He carried me 1.5 miles and burned every scrap of his winter to keep the heat in me and would not be paid for it, and his sheep scattered while he was fetching me, and he was out 3 nights after them, and he was dead by the May. The room was absolutely still. There is no sum, my brother said. I have looked for one for 11 years, so I sent what I could and never signed it and let that village believe in a dead wool merchant. And I will tell you why, and then I have done. Because the day I put my name to it, Kirkborough becomes a place that is kept, and Miss Thirlby becomes a woman who has been given something by a duke. I did not want to be thanked. I wanted them to stand up straight in their own church. He looked down at the ring in his hand. And there is one more reason, he said, which is the only dishonest thing in the whole account. I have been to Kirkborough twice and stood at the back of that church and left before the blessing and never once let myself be seen. Because I knew what I would want to ask, and I had no right on this earth to ask it of a woman who thought she owed me her grandmother's eyesight. He raised his head and he looked at my aunt. That is the scandal in my ledger, he said. There it is. Read it out in Netherby if you care to. Then he turned back to Nell Thirlby, in her wet cloak, in the middle of the shining floor. But she does not think it now, he said. She has just told 60 people that she owes me nothing, and she is right, and she is the only person in this room who is at liberty. So I may ask, Miss Thirlby. Renfell, my aunt's voice cracked like a stick. Thursday, the Halbrooks. Oh, be quiet, Sybil. That was Miss Halbrook. I shall think well of her until I die. She came forward in her silver gown, perfectly composed, her mother making a noise like a kettle behind her, and said, Your Grace, I have sat beside you at 11 dinners, and you have never once looked at me the way you are presently looking at that young woman's boots. I am not a fool, and I do not want a monument either. And then, in the clear, carrying voice of a girl who has just discovered she is enjoying herself, There is to be no announcement. Papa, keep your settlement. Somebody give the poor creature a chair. She's been on the Netherby coach. I have never heard 100 people begin talking at once with such relief. My brother did not appear to hear it. He had taken Nell Thirlby's hand, turning it up. the brown, weathered working hand of it, in front of them all, and put the ring back into her palm and closed her fingers over it. "It was never mine to give until you knew whose it was," he said. "Now you know, keep it or throw it in the beck, but I am asking." Nell looked at the ring a long moment. Then she looked up at him, and her chin came up, and I saw the corner of her mouth go, and I knew my brother was lost. "I'll not answer you here," she said. "No. No, you've had 11 years of doing this the quiet way, and look where it's got you." She closed her hand around the ring. "You'll come up to Kirkborough, in the daylight with your name on you, and you'll walk down that street and let every soul in it say thank you to your face, and you'll stand there and take it, however it hurts you. My father never got to. Somebody's going to." My brother stood very still. "And then," said Nell Thirlby, "when you've been thanked proper and we're square, then you can ask me again, and I'll give you an answer you can trust." He bowed to her in his own hall in front of the county, as low as he had ever bowed to anyone in his life. "Thursday," he said. "Thursday," she said, "wear your boots." He went up on the Thursday, and I went with him, and it was the hardest day's work I ever watched a man do. They came out of the houses, all 14 of them, and the Dales beyond, and the shepherd from the inn, and Bella Hartop who walked 6 miles for it, and the schoolmaster with the children in a row. They said it to him one at a time. He stood in the street with his hat in his hand and took it, and by the middle of it he could not speak at all, and Nell stood at his elbow and did not help him and did not let him leave. Last of all he went into the low room by the fire, and knelt down, which was the only way to do it, and Grandam Thirlby put both hands on his face and held it 9 inches from her own, and looked at him a long, long while with her mended eyes. "Aye," she said at last, "there thou art. And then thou's a deal grayer." They were married in the church at Kirkborough in the September, which meant the whole of the north had to come up a cart track and stand in the wet, and caused more offense than anything my brother did before or after. Grandam Thirlby sat in the front pew and turned her face to the sound all the way through, and when the bride came level with her she reached out into the air, and Nell stopped and bent down, and the old woman looked at her a moment at arm's length in the white. "I can see thee," she said. "That is the part I remember, not the settlement which was enormous, nor my aunt's face which was a study, that. She never made a soft duchess. She had the fold under her hand within 2 years and the Renfell flocks after it, and there is a school in Kirkborough with the name of Jonas Thirlby on a slate above the door, at her insistence and against my brother's, the one argument of their marriage that he lost publicly. Strangers still called him the Silent Duke, and I never troubled to correct them. But I stood outside a certain door at Renfell one evening long afterwards, and heard my brother talking on the other side of it. Easily, at length, the way I had heard him do exactly once before in my life, in a library at 11 at night with the ring gone from his hand. I did not go in. I went and stood on the terrace and looked north at Senate Fell going blue in the dusk, where a shepherd I never met burned his whole winter for a vain young man in the snow, asked for nothing, and got in the end a school with his name on it and a daughter who would not let the debt be paid in the dark. We don't sell a fire. I have thought about it for 30 years. I have never heard a better sentence.